At this point, you've probably assessed the array of like gender critical men and women out there. Would you consider yourself now more of like a rad femme, or are you kind of like releasing, like avoiding titles, or like where would you sit yourself?
Yeah, I would say that like I can like I find points where I agree with everybody, even like the opposition or whatever. And so like I don't publicly identify as anything. I have a Tumblr account, right? And so I've had the same one forever, and I was trans on it before, and now I'm not. And I've been pretty openly sharing the detransition story with people on there when they ask. And I say straight up, the facts about what happened to me and how it, biologically is, because what happened to me was I got sick. So, and I just like say straight up, and I get actually a lot of positive feedback on there. I think I don't know, I guess the people who follow me are like not, I don't think they're in that circle or whatever of like people who would disown you for saying those kinds of things, but I've gotten a lot of positive feedback even from people who are like currently identifying as trans or non-binary. um so like, I
Interesting.
keep, yeah, I keep the labels off just so that like I can, I guess, reach more people who would like might be turned off by that, but also would be open to listening to it when it's presented from a neutral perspective.
It's so interesting because I wouldn't consider your experience neutral at all.
Right. Yeah. No,
You sounds
I
like
mean,
you
I'm
had a
yeah,
extreme actually
yeah,
experience.
yeah, yeah. I mean, it's not as extreme as like the worst I've ever heard, but yeah, I mean, I'm careful with how I, enunciate things because it is a sensitive subject for people who are on hormones or considering like these people are really suffering. Uh, and so it's like I'm not the bombastic one to be like, telling people very harshly about stuff like that. But I won't like be like, I'm not adding caveats. Like I actually did get flack for this one, was that a really long time friend of mine, we got into it because she is like pro trans, and I was, saying stuff like I would not recommend transitioning and here's why. And she was coming at me from the perspective of like, how can you say that when you aren't trans, right?
Mm,
um but I actually am right now, like I'm trans right now, you know what I mean? Like I can just say I am and then I am. It's that simple,
right.
because it's a label and it's an identity that you build over time, right? It's not actually inherent. You're not born like that. It's like a teacher's not born a teacher. It's an identity that you build in your life. So um I explained to her that like from my experience, I got physically sick to the point where I couldn't work for weeks from these hormones, right? So how can I have a integrity and tell people it might work for you? Because it harmed me. It made my life not livable, right? So I could not, there's no way that I could have that experience and then be like, just, yeah, it might work for you, right?
Right. It's like Russian roulette with, I mean, or even worse, actually, because we know that,
Right. Yeah.
Lupron, for example, is objectively harmful for the
Yeah.
human body, so it's
Right.
not even like a guessing game. We actually have hard evidence that
Right.
these drugs are harmful, and they have never been studied in a long-term way in this particular use. So
Right.
there's a lot of like, oh, we don't know. But will you kind of take us back to, yeah, how did it all begin? Where do you see like the origin of your story?
Well, if we want to start at the medical transitioning part, that is more recent. So I started hormones at 18, like 2 months after I turned 18. It's a pretty common story. Like you walk into Planned Parenthood, you walk out with them. Um, I didn't receive any kind of lab work before receiving the prescription. Like they took my blood and then they gave me the prescription. So they didn't receive any results. Um, which is like, you would say like that's medical malpractice, but from my perspective, I want to change the fundamental assertion of that, because that's saying that like if they had tested me and gotten the results first, then it would have been more legitimate as a treatment. But fundamentally, we know that like your body makes the correct hormones for a reason, and changing that is going to be fundamentally harmful. So test or no test, it's not a legitimate treatment in the first place, right? So the test is kind of like, it's going to be bad either way. So they didn't test me, but it doesn't add up to much. So I got on the hormones. It was like a relatively low dose. And I figured out through process of elimination that I'm actually genetically hypersensitive to testosterone, because when they did get my labs back, my testosterone was a completely normal female level, but I had started to develop like chest hair, and like I had fully developed stomach hair. So, I mean, I think that was also like a mental thing, because I had been identifying for a few years at that point. But yeah, I started the hormones, and I had very classic, I would say somewhat pretty classic menopausal symptoms, like I would get these prickly heat rashes all over my body from really mild things, like standing outside when it was 70 degrees. Yeah, or disagreeing with somebody. I would get like a full over. It wasn't a visible rash, but it was extremely prickly and like itchy, and just not a good thing to be happening. I just ignored that. And it eventually went away after a while. And so I stayed on. Okay, yeah, I stayed on from November 2019, and then in August of 2020, I scheduled a consultation to get a mastectomy, right? Because I was anticipating that I'd go to a really farm labor type of job the next year. So I was like, I can't be binding anymore.
And when did you start binding your breasts?
Oh, yeah, I started that when I was 15, when I first started identifying, because for me, like I actually started passing. I started being identified as male right when I cut my hair and like started presenting masculinely. So but yeah, so I had been binding for, actually I was using, I mean, this is really bad, but I was actually just using duct tape, just one piece.
Yeah.
Because I had like B cup size, so it wasn't huge and I could get away with it. So because like constricting your entire rib cage sucks. It really sucks. And duct tape sucks less, as it turns out. But around the edges of where the tape was, it would like cause little sores that were like itchy and very raw. Um, so yeah, I was doing that for years, and it just wasn't something I want to do anymore. So I thought I'd better go get them cut off. So um, I went for my consultation the first time, and it was as if I was like ordering a cup of coffee, because I walked out that day with the surgery date set, because it was an informed consent. It was a plastic surgery office, so they did it on an informed consent basis. So yeah, still 18, I scheduled my mastectomy for like 16 days after my birthday, for when I turned 19.
Wow.
Yeah, so that went so smoothly, and I paid for it out of pocket because it was a cosmetic procedure. Um, so that was about a third of my income from 2020, while I was working 3 jobs the whole year. Well, not the whole year, because one of them was seasonal, it was blueberry picking, and then I picked up another one in June, but 3 jobs at the time I got surgery. So a lot of money. And yeah, so the kind of surgery that I got, I'm so glad I got this kind, because it was actually a partial mastectomy. They called it keyhole, where they make an incision under the nipple, and what they actually do is they remove the bottom half of your breast, right? Because I was small enough to qualify. Uh, so that thankfully left me with some tissue. It does look kind of odd because it's only the top half, but like I'm very glad that that's there, because I still actually, after coming off testosterone, the tissue became larger with the estrogen. So I think it's like an A cup now. which is nice. So yeah, got the mastectomy, and after that, during my recovery period, I actually had kind of like a spiritual revelation that God was real.
Mm.
It was really interesting because even when I was going into surgery, I already had doubts, like a lot. Like I had doubts from the very beginning because like even when I was like 16, like I remember having a psychotic, or not psychotic necessarily, but just like a really breakdown type of like evening and day, not just one moment, but like where I was thinking like I'm never gonna have kids, like I'm sterilizing myself.
Mm.
And that had a huge impact on me, and I really had to bend my mind in order to be able to accept that and like make it be something that was fine. I came up with the analogy that like uh a fruit tree, like not every limb bears fruit or something, but like it's not a good excuse for sterilizing yourself for no reason.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, so I had that revelation, and I just felt really weird. That was in September of last year. So like from September until December, I was just kind of going back to work and feeling really weird. And like after you've had a mastectomy, like I had a job where I had to reach up a lot, and it was like I was wearing this post-surgical thing at work, and so it was very like awkward, like because you could see it through my clothes and it would like
Mm.
shift and I'd have to readjust. That was lame. And then in December, I think it was December where I had the idea of let me try upping my dose. And this wasn't because of like they never prescribed me a higher dose, but for some reason I think I had extra. And so I upped it. I like almost doubled my dose from zero point 0.3 milliliters to 0.5, which is low. They would want you on like 0.7 or something. Uh, but I did that, and I started to experience symptoms of polycythemia, which is the bone cancer, which I don't think I ever had because I obviously don't have cancer now. Like I'm chilling, but I started to experience those symptoms of like fatigue, and I don't remember all of them, but it was obvious that I was not supposed to do that, so I stopped. And I came up short. I think I probably just like miscalculated the amount I had, but right after that, I started having like not enough to get me to my next appointment. So I tapered it down to like 1.1 milliliters a week. And that was when I really started to have UTI symptoms. I had like UTI symptoms throughout December too, but in January it became very severe. Like I mean, I don't even know. It was crazy. One night after getting home, I had this like after getting home from work, I had this episode of kidney pain that was so dire. It was it was really concerning. And that was the day, that was January 8th. That was the day I was supposed to take my next shot, right? And I'd never miss one. But that day I had that pain and I was just like, no, no way. Like I can't be putting things in my body when my body is like dying.
Wow.
And my mom was taking care of me and she was like rubbing my back, and I remember feeling how bony my back was, like where she was rubbing it, because my body fat had gone away, and I'd had like more muscle, and that it just all started to really uh build up to a peak of like all these doubts that I've had up until now, and the fact that I know logically you can't put these hormones in your body and expect to be healthy. It was all just adding up, and throughout that whole month I was like out of work for pretty much the whole month. I went back for a week, and then I developed a silent fever, with like a fever with no other symptoms, while I was at work. And so that lasted like 5 days at the end of the month, and it just kept like it was just by the end of the month I was like, this identity thing is over,
Wow.
you know. So Yeah. So then yeah, that left me like, when you build this whole identity for years, and then it just stops, you're like nowhere. You're left nowhere, right? And you don't have any idea what to do or like who to be. Um, so it was like that for a while. And then in February, I had this episode of like really like I cried really, really hard one time in early February. And I remember like my mind was spitting out like these like hateful, it sounded like somebody else was talking, like fighting. It was like, I hate women, I hate femininity, I hate anything feminine, I hate, like I'm always, it was telling me I'm always going to feel envious of men because they're men and I'm not. And I had that, and it was like, you know, I was really frustrated. And then after that stopped, it really like legit felt like something left physically, like mentally. It was very drastic. And then after that, like I just kind of did a 180. And
Wow.
by like March, I basically look like how I look now, except without bangs. I just suddenly became much more comfortable and like embracing the idea of being a woman, right? Because in the end of January, when I was like on the tail end of all that being sick, I truly was like reduced to nothing. I was just like, I just want to be healthy. My body just needs to come back online. Like, I accept you. I am totally for you. Like, I want you to work. Like, I want to work with you. Um, and my period actually came back exactly 30 days from the day that I was supposed to take my testosterone shot with the kidney pain. Exactly 30 days.
Wow.
That was great, because that doesn't happen for a lot of women. Like, when they come off, like sometimes it takes a while. But since then, it's been perfectly regular. And every time I get it, I'm so happy. And something funny happened last night. I went out to like a date, and when I had set it up, I was like, that day I'm supposed to get my period, right? But I was like, you know what? Talking to myself, be like, I'm gonna get my period after the date. And literally the moment I sat down at home, I got it painlessly. This is what makes me so convinced of the mind body connection. Like, it's once you got it, man, it just it starts to confirm itself. It's really, that made me feel pretty proud. I was like, we're
Wow.
together. Yeah.
Wow. To
So
go from like totally dissociating and
yeah.
even having parts of your body removed to then being aligned and not only having a cycle, but actually being so attuned that you would ask your cycle to give you one extra day. You
Yeah.
would ask the start of your bleed to wait one day so you could go on this date. That's amazing.
Yeah. I felt pretty proud of it. And it's like, oh man, yeah. So yeah. So that's the extent of my medical transition. Something I have to mention about the mastectomy too is that it's been 10 months now, since September, I think. Uh, they don't tell you that it's going to be numb for like a year. Like, it's still, the surgical area where they remove the tissue is actually still numb, but it'll also occasionally have like these nerve pains
Mm.
from the scar tissue. And also, like, they left the nipple intact, like the part underneath of it that connects it to you. They left that intact, and that's really painful to touch. Like, the tissue that's left is pretty painful. I'm hoping that that's actually like meaning that there's some healing going on, because when your breasts grow during puberty, they also hurt to the touch. So um, that's what I'm manifesting, I guess,
Mm-hmm.
that that's what's going on. But yeah, it's not like a snip and you're done.
Mm-hmm.
And they
Mm-hmm.
don't let you know. Like, it's all smiles. Like, the office was hot pink. It was so, they don't let you know up front about that.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've heard that from some of the other women I've spoken to who have stopped taking testosterone. And I mean, and so you did not have a hysterectomy, obviously, because you
No.
are cycling. And wow. So like the turnaround was actually quite short for you.
Yeah.
And that was because your health just suffered so drastically, and it was so confronting.
Right. Yeah.
It's
I
like,
mean,
yeah.
because I like with my identity, I'd been having problems the whole time. Like for 2020, I kind of felt like the most secure in 2020 for my identity. I felt like I'm the most well adjusted. Like I'm like killing it. I'm killing it. I got 3 jobs. Like I'm busting everything. Like I'm doing it. But under the surface, I was making friends with people. I've made some of the best friends that I have, and they didn't know, or I didn't tell them explicitly. I was living under this fake identity, and that really got to me for real.
Mm.
Because like you can't tell your friend about your childhood or anything that happened to you before you started identifying, because that's dead to you anyway, because you had to cut it off and kill it in order to have your new identity, right? But they can't know, because that's going to change how they see you. you
Mm.
know so that was really difficult for me, and I had kind of a breakdown moment of that in like October, uh because I was thinking about it, and the way that I justified it to myself was that everyone's gender is fake. Everybody's identity is fake. Everybody's just bodies, and every identity that you put on top of that is just as fake as the other one. So my gender was just as fake as anybody else.
Hmm.
So
Mm.
that was how I felt good about myself. Also, I was like, at that point, I was scoffing at the idea of being a woman, right? I was like, that's like, you think of it in your mind as an option. It's like, that's not even an option. That's how I approached it the whole time when I started identifying, was that's not an option. I'm just not built for that. Like, that was how I thought of it. And so, yeah, that was pretty interesting way to justify everybody else's
Wow.
gender is just as fake as yours.
I
No.
I really appreciate you saying that. I've never heard it kind of rationalized in that way. Um and like to some extent, I mean, I hear what you're saying. Like I can totally understand that thought process. It's like, well, we're all kind of taught to perform and do, and it's hard to know what's ours and what's someone else's and what's programming and what's innate. And
Right.
the only problem with, as you know, that process is like, well, we actually are our flesh. Like we
Right.
actually live in this body, whether we think this is like an incarnation or not. Like
Right.
at this point in time, like we are on earth and this is our physical body. But I've heard it's like time and time again, like within trans ideology, it's like the promotion of like this just being like a meat sack. Like it's
Yeah,
just,
what the idea is that your body is just an accessory to your clothes. It's just what your clothes are on. Like your genitals are just it's just like a little fact that's like, as important as like what color your wall is or something. It's not something that, like, because the idea, like, your desire is just disembodied now. Like everybody, this is the problem basically of the whole society, but specifically transgender problems, is that you're disembodying everything about yourself, but your desire, like for example in the sexuality debate where it's like, unlearn your genital preferences. The reason why they do that is because they're positing that your attraction is not actually physical, that you're just a consciousness being attracted to another consciousness. And anybody who's ever had sex before knows that that's not true. Like, but that's actually why I think it sells so well to people who've never had sex before, like young people, right?
right.
Because they haven't had that experience, or they have had that experience and they don't want it to be the case. They don't want to have their desire embodied anymore because they were a victim of somebody else's desire, right? So
Mm,
it's an
yeah.
attractive
Mm.
paradigm no matter who you are, because either like you're escaping, right?
I just want to go back to what you said, that being like escaping desire because they've been a victim of someone else's like perverse desire. Like I
Right.
think what you're referring to there is childhood sexual assault.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's something that never happened to me. We can get into like the reason why I transitioned, which was also like a grand revelation for me that happened in about February. And so I have a weird story with school. I was homeschooled up until third grade. Then I went to a Christian private school, like third through sixth. And at that school, it wasn't too bad. I mean, I was considered annoying. I didn't fit in with the girls or the boys. I tried both. Neither one would have me. And so I went to this next private school that was third through 12th, all in one room with one teacher. We did our work individually on laptops. And the teacher had three sons. And so they were the three constants that were always in the class. The rest of the class had a lot of turnover, and the ones that would stay were boys of the same age group. So I went there when I was about 11. Uh, and that school was essentially an all male environment. Okay, so the teacher was a woman, and then there was like a third grade girl. I couldn't really be friends with her because I was in sixth grade. And then there would be like one other girl who was my age, and we would never click ever. And we would actually like be at odds.
Mm.
So the most attractive social group at that time, for me being 12 through 13, was the 15 through 18-year-old guys. That didn't work out. I did not make it into that social group. But it didn't really hit me why. Like it hit me subconsciously. I have a, people know, like I knew why. But I just kept trying because I just didn't have any other friends. Like I had one friend from the previous school, but she was distant because we were going to different schools. And so from 11 to 13, which is a very formative period of your identity, um, and how you learn how the world works, I was basically watching, this group of older boys having everything that I wanted because they had friendship, they had freedom, they had girlfriends, they had, everything I wanted. And like they wouldn't let me in. So halfway through ninth grade, I dropped out of that school, and I was into Magic the Gathering at that time. So I started spending all my time at the card shop. And that was an even more universally male environment. Like there were actually no females at all in that environment. Um, and so I achieved a little bit more acceptance there because the guys were old enough that they would kind of look down on me in like a uncle type of way. But they still like obviously didn't treat me the exact same as the guy of their age. They would like be more polite around me, and they wouldn't talk about certain things around me, and that still hurt me because I was still outside the box. Like I was still
Mm.
outside the group.
And at
um
this point, were you presenting as like gender nonconforming? Would you like consider
yeah,
your look like to be tomboy-esque? Like how were you presenting at this time?
yeah. When I was in the first school, like at third grade, I got my hair cut short for the first time. I didn't like keep it maintained ever, but I just got it because I thought it was cool. It was like the Pink, the singer. I had like a tendency towards short hair a little bit at that time. And then I grew it out again, and then I got it cut short like Buzz with the undercut when I was like 13. And I was wearing like mostly boys' clothes just because, I didn't have any, I wasn't dressing to be attractive. I was literally a little kid. Like it's really not normal for kids to be dressing in an attractive way, right? So yeah, I was wearing boys' clothes. I was wearing boys' haircut, whatever. But I wasn't identifying at that time or anything like that. So what happened was that it kind of slid downhill really fast. Like I was suicidal from like 10 or 11, 10, it was 10, up until like 15 or 16, around when I came out as trans, because that was the placebo that kind of got me out of it.
Mm.
Um, but so I was suicidal. Like I did self-harm when I was very small, like 11 and 12. I was dissociating from my body a lot because that's a part of being depressed. I was very depressed, and like I was addicted to video games too, like
Mm.
12 hours a day type of stuff for like when I was like 13 and 14. And
Wow.
video games don't exactly facilitate like embodiment and like, you know what I mean? It's an escape into a different world. And so I was dissociating at that time, and then I was 14, and I could kind of heard like off in the distance about gender stuff. So I thought, well, because it was funny. I had these like really off, like one-off thoughts of like wanting to be male from like 13 up until I came out, or I, transitioned. Like I remember thinking when I was 12 or 13, upon seeing these guys that I was talking about that I wanted, that I envied so much, I thought to myself, wow, I wish I was the exact opposite of everything that I am. Because the guy that I was talking about was a guy, he was black, and he was, 17 or so. So he was the exact opposite of me in every way. And that thought kind of went out the other side of my head, or so I thought. It didn't result in me like having dysphoria or wanting to be more masculine or male or anything like that. But I had that kind of thought. And then when I was suicidal, like later, I remember thinking to myself, well, before I kill myself, I will transition to male just to see what that'd be like. Then after that, I was dissociating, and I thought to myself, in light of the gender stuff, like, I'm technically a guy on the inside, but I'm really agender because I just don't care. Like, I don't mind being like this. That was when I was 14. And yeah, when I was 14, I got into a relationship with my friend. That was, enjoyable. I enjoyed that. It was funny because I had introduced myself to him as gay. Like, I was like, I'm gay. And he was like, okay, cool. Because from like 11 years old, I had thought that I was attracted to women, which I attribute to not having any female friends and wanting that intimacy and that closeness so
Mm.
badly that, plus also being kind of outcast and being, shamed and feeling shame around my desires. I thought, well, I can fit into that group of people who are like socially instantiated as being shameful, right? So
So then
lesbians.
I see. So you're like, hey, dude, like I'm gay, but we're
Yeah, I
actually
only
going to
like
have a
women. Yeah.
relationship. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, I only like women. Then we were friends for a year, and then I was like, hey, I actually like you. And he's like, okay, cool. And then we had a relationship, and that was pretty, enjoyable for a while until I got tired of it, as one does sometimes. And right at that time when I started to get tired of it, I the trans like idea just really came to a head for me. And I thought one day, like, why don't I just go out this time and present as male? Because I had buzzed my hair at that point. So I buzzed my hair, and I was like, let me go present as male and see what happens. And I passed as male. Like, the cashier read, it was like, hey, how you doing, sir? And that was like a worldview change moment. Like, on the ride home, I was like, oh, what does this mean? Like, what does this mean for me? Like, this is it. Like, this is what I'm gonna do. Like, so
How did you even like hear about trans? Like we're talking
right,
about it as if it was just always on the table, always there, but like I'm
right,
curious, and maybe that's what it was for you given like your age and the time that you were first exposed to it. Like as we know, like children are being exposed like to this possibility of this thing
right.
trans younger and younger. So I'm curious, like, do you can you remember the point where you first saw something trans related on, was it Tumblr? Was it through
Yeah.
the video games? Was it at school?
Yeah, I remember the very first time I saw anything like that. It was a special on TV about Thomas Beatty, the man who's pregnant or something like the pregnant man. And I was like very, very young. I couldn't even understand what was happening. And I was like, how did he get his boob? But men don't have boobs. Like, I actually thought like he was a guy somehow. I didn't understand it.
Yeah.
So that wasn't real to me. But I got introduced to like the culture. Like, I guess I just received it through, because, okay, this is how it happened, is because I was online in like the lesbian and bisexual, like I was in the sexuality circle of online. And so that just overlapped with transgender. And so I ended up seeing images of women who had taken testosterone. They looked like men. And I was like, dang, they look good, right? So it just, started like being in the under the surface of my mind from that. Yeah, that was where it got in, was just, osmosis through online circles. And I was never involved in like trans activists, like non-binary or gender involved people or anything like that. I always like shunned that. And that was a way that I actually used to justify myself as being more valid, right? Is because I took an alternative, like I took a more legitimate approach. I took a more scientific and materialist approach to it. I was like, my brain is like this. Like, I was like, I'm not like those others, I'm not like, you know, you know,
You mean like you weren't like in between? You just like were a man trapped in a woman's
right.
body?
Yeah. And I was like, you have to have gender dysphoria to transition, or, I didn't think like gender wasn't binary. I was like, this is why I'm transitioning, because gender is binary and
Mm,
I'm not the right one. So,
mm,
yeah. So I fell
mhm.
in with like the rationalist or the more conservative types.
Ah, I see what you're
Yeah.
saying. Yeah.
Yeah. Right. So, yeah, so I had that moment of like, this is what my life's going to be. And I was still in the relationship with that guy at that time. And I told him, and it was really, it was stomach turning even at the time, but he actually completely accepted it. And he was like, okay. And he started calling me his boyfriend overnight. And he was like at military school on the phone and talking to his roommates. He's like, this is my boyfriend. They're like, no, it's not. They're like, we know it's not. But
Oh
yeah,
my
no,
gosh.
yeah, that was freaky. Even at that time where I was like, I want this, it was like, it was gross to me.
I mean, it's so interesting how easy it is because I had this experience. Like it was actually really straightforward to get me on board to deny that sex was real.
Yeah, and it's like me and this guy had sex once, so like, it was like it was just it wasn't even like it. I don't know. It was just that much more unreal what he was saying. Like we have done it before. Like, that this is not true, but I
Right.
mean,
It sounds like
he
maybe he was
yeah,
afraid of losing you and he thought,
yeah,
the way to keep you is to just affirm and,
right, yeah,
who knows?
yeah. I mean, the choice is either be like the worst kind of bigot possible or just go with it, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So
So then I'm curious. I mean, like we're like jumping around, but I'm like, do you still have a relationship with this person? Do you still keep in touch with this person?
yeah, we keep in touch. We broke up very shortly after I came out. And yeah, it's been like, almost 5 years, and I saw him the other day. Yeah. Yep. I told him about it too after I detransitioned. He was on like the second tier of people I told, like not the very first, but I did tell him about it. He was just like, damn, that sucks. Ouch, that's a bad mistake.
Okay. All
Yeah, yeah,
right. Wow.
yeah,
Wow.
yeah. So
It's interesting because so many people have to play along for like to follow out the vision or the idea that people are stuck in the wrong bodies. It requires like it's a
right.
participatory experience for partners, family. Like you mentioned earlier that you wanted what the guys had, and that was like friendship.
Mhm.
I think you said freedom,
Yeah, just to be like,
girlfriends.
yeah. I wanted to be accepted. I wanted to have friendship. I wanted to have social success. Like, I see what happened to me as really kind of an extended social trauma, because I was being denied female support, female friendship, which is actually necessary for young women growing up. It's actually not an option. Like, it's not optional. It's really necessary for healthy growth. And so I was being denied that, and I was seeing them have everything I wanted. So yeah, I wanted that so bad. And when I came to the conclusion that I was transitioning, I was trans, that it was extremely easy for me to retroactively say, like, I always wanted to be male, because I was in that situation where I wanted what they had. So it was easy for me to say, that was me wanting to be male. That was me having dysphoria or something like that.
Rather than just you having a normal human desire to like be in community and seen and have these deep relationships with.
Right. Yeah. That's the power of the mind, is that you can retroactively, like, you can rename your memories. Like, you can actually change what happened to you by thinking about it differently. And that was what I did. And yeah, the first year that I was identifying as trans was really, it was really tough, because it was a lot of anxiety, and I knew this like consciously. I was like, okay, what I'm doing right now is I'm actually I'm destroying my old identity in order to build a new one. And I was like, it was actually like, people, when they discuss transgender problems, they don't always talk about how difficult it is, because it's actually really tough mental work to deny reality every day and convince yourself of something like that, and to cut yourself off from yourself, really, because your lived experience makes up who you are. And so you're cutting off yourself and your family by extension, and your body. It was very stressful. I had the most anxiety I've ever had for that first year, just because it was constant, and it manifested physically, because I'd be in the bathtub, like, in the hot water, relaxing everything, and I would still feel like my lungs were hurting from like breathing. It was not good. But yeah, so that was like the first year. And then I got a job as a male, kind of, and this whole time I was passing with no problem. Like, only two, or I could count on one hand the amount of people who actually questioned that I was a guy. I don't know. Like, I lived in North Carolina. I was working in Raleigh. That's not exactly like a hick type of area. Like, you know what I mean? Like, there are butch women in Raleigh, but I guess I just tipped the scale too much. So yeah, there was that first year. Then I was 17. Things just, I just worked a lot, and then I went to the medical aspect, and that catches you up to where we are now, basically, because we already talked about that.
Wow.
Yeah.
So what was you mentioned that your mom was taking care of you post surgery.
Oh, no.
Or
no, she was not. No, that's the thing. My relationship with my mom, we never really had a great relationship. And I did not tell her anything about it ever. I never spoke a word about being trans. I never spoke a word about hormones. I got the hormones without her knowledge. And she like found injections, or I got injection supplies delivered, and she got the package and she wouldn't let me have it. And that was kind of a little fight, because she knew what was going on, but neither of us would talk about it. And she's like, I can't let you have these. And I was like, but I just want to be normal. Like, that's what I kept repeating to her, was I just want to be normal. That was what I was thinking was going to happen from me taking testosterone, was I'd be more normal. Yeah. So she was not on board with it. But she did not know how to approach the subject with me. So, she was just stuck, like, distant from me. So I never told her about the hormones and the surgery. I actually just told her I'm going on vacation for 2 weeks. Yeah. I went to go stay at my friend's house the whole time.
Oh my gosh.
And it's crazy. This is what's crazy, is because she kind of had a suspicion. She kind of knew. So I was out for surgery for 2 weeks. During that 2 weeks, she low-key knew what was going on, but again, didn't say anything. And she actually had her period twice in that 2 weeks. Like, the connection, like, it was like an emotional, it was very psychic. Like, it was a psychic connection. She was like, she knew that something bad was happening to me because of that reaction in her body that happened. So yeah. So yeah, I came home with less boobs, no boobs at that point. And never said anything never said anything until I, told her everything when I detransitioned, because I was like planning on wearing a dress out of the house. So I just had to come out and let her know before I like walked out of my room in a dress. So yeah, it was like
So,
it was about 5 years or 4 years of not saying anything, and then all at once letting her know everything.
oh
Yeah.
my gosh. So do
Yeah.
you, I mean, I'm just trying to imagine how this logistically worked. Like,
Mm-hmm.
did you share a bathroom? I mean,
Mm-mm.
you had your
No.
own
Right.
room, your own bathroom.
Mm-hmm.
I
Yeah.
mean, to come home from a pretty major surgery, I mean, did you have drainage or was that already gone?
Yeah, the type, I mean, I stayed at my friend's house for the majority, like the first few days. But yeah, the way they did the drainage was like they just had these little tubes sticking out of me, and it was actually just flowing out into like pads. Um, so I was wearing that little binder like thing. I mean, honestly, this is the truth. I went back for the post-surgery care, and they told me like, you've healed better and faster than the majority of our patients. Like when the day after surgery, I was like making my own food, like in a cast iron pan, like picking up that much weight. I really wasn't incapacitated at all.
Wow.
Yeah, other than like the trance that I was kind of in from the painkillers. But I didn't even if I didn't take the painkillers, I didn't have a lot of pain either. So I got
So
out pretty lucky.
so you said that your mom low key knew. By
Hmm.
that, do you mean she was in some kind of denial?
No, I think she just, had the idea of that was what was happening, but it wasn't something that she was really engaging with in her head. Like, when you have thoughts and you don't carry on the thought, like I mean, maybe she was, now that I think about it, she probably was thinking about it really hard, but uh yeah, she just never talked about it to me. Like, she's the type of person to just know stuff without having someone tell you what, so
Hmm.
um yeah, she already really knew,
So
even
then
though I hadn't said anything.
so you did the big reveal, and then how did she respond?
Oh, I never revealed anything. You mean like shirtless?
No, I don't mean a literal taking off your
Oh,
shirt.
okay.
I just meant like being like, hey, I did
Right.
this.
Right. Yeah. No, I never told her that I had surgery until I detransitioned, and I told her everything about my life. Yeah.
I still can't wrap my head around how you would be living in the same house with someone and have all this go on.
Right.
I mean, I grew up in very, very close quarters with my mom. I mean, I couldn't hide anything if
The
I
fact is, I
tried.
mean, my voice changed. Like my facial hair started to grow. It really was visually apparent what was happening, but she just she was just stuck in like she just couldn't approach the subject. She didn't know how, and like just wasn't able to bring it up. And since we had never really had that emotionally supportive relationship, even from when I was like 11, she really didn't have a lot of ability to, emotionally support me in any case, much less
Mm.
something that she had no idea what it was, why it was happening. Like, there were a couple of times where I tried to explain to her how I'd always wanted to be a boy and stuff like that. And, after the first couple years of identifying, like, basically after I started testosterone, I started to physically change. That in her mind really just like made it like, accept this, and you just have to accept it. Like, she at that point made the switch, and it was funny because she actually started calling me her son around the time when I was like detransitioning. Because actually what happened uh was that she was never calling me, the right pronouns. Um, Even after I was on testosterone, and I was working at the same restaurant that she was for a while, and she was calling me she, and everybody else was calling me the correct pronouns. And she actually got fired from that restaurant for misgendering me. Can you believe it? That's hilarious, right? They fired her for misgendering her son, right? So at that point, that was really emotional for her. Like that hurt her really deeply. And she felt like I was on their side too. So she was like, the whole world is against me. And I think that really, that trauma really just broke through the last straw that she had to not accepting me as her son. So after that point, she started to like get on board.
Oh my gosh. Cause like the
Yeah,
universe was like punishing her
right.
and gaslighting her.
Yeah,
Like
yeah,
we need to like name this again. Your mother got
yeah.
fired from her job
Hmm.
for referring to you, her daughter, as her daughter with
Yeah,
she, her
yes.
biologically accurate
And she could look
pronouns.
my preferred name that I would go by, that I went by for my entire working period as a guy, was my last name, which is Carter. And that's like a passable first name. And the reason why I chose that is because my mom wouldn't be able to like say that that wasn't my name. So
Ah, okay.
yeah, so she was calling me that at the restaurant. She was going for the name, but she wouldn't switch the pronouns. And that was too much. It was just too confusing for people. One of the managers was actually kind of vindictive about it. Like she was kind of like having a victory over the fact that she fought transphobia by firing my mom.
By firing
Yeah,
a middle-aged woman from her job. That's
right. Yeah, yeah,
disgusting. Oh my gosh. Oh
yeah,
my
yeah,
gosh.
yeah.
Well, speaking of transphobia, I would love to hear, I love asking formerly trans identified women this question.
Hmm.
What did you think of TERFs?
Oh yeah, that was oof. They got me really I avoided it. They triggered me so badly. Like it was so threatening. Like there's this one blog that I remember called Dirty White Boy or something. Have you heard of it?
No.
No. Okay. Well, she's like very butch, and she had like the very first turf like hate blog that I ever saw. And she was very harsh in her opinions. And whenever I'd see her content, like I had a huge sense of anxiety, and I just blocked it. Same thing with detransitioners too. I would watch videos of detransitioners from time to time, and it was really just so terrifying. Not even because I was thinking like I'm going to I don't know. It was just, it's kind of like, I guess, on a subconscious level, like recognizing that like, there's holes in the story,
Hmm.
like the narrative that I was so eager to accept, that I was trans, uh it wasn't like encompassing all of reality. So yeah, I was hating on turfs for real. Yeah, I was not a fan at all.
That makes sense. I wasn't a fan either, and then I became one.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah. I had this app actually. This is funny. There's this Google web extension or Chrome extension. It's called Shinigami Eyes. It's like there's an anime character called Shinigami or something. And users go on there and they can uh it will basically cause any link that they mark to be highlighted in either green or red, and red is transphobic and green is trans positive. So I got that, it's free, and I was using that to like block people. Like if it was red, I'd block them. And now now at this point I'm like unblock, like the opposite. So you should get that one.
oh my gosh.
Yeah,
Can
yeah.
you name the app again?
Yeah, Shinigami Eyes. It's like Shinigami. Yeah.
That's
Yeah,
hysterical.
yeah.
Oh my gosh.
So I love the app. It's a great app. Really, honestly, I love that app. Everybody should get that app.
Oh my gosh. This is amazing. I'm learning so much from
Yeah, yeah.
speaking with you. Um you had mentioned earlier you felt passionate about kind of what's going on with children and the trans label and pharma.
Yeah.
Can you speak to that a little bit?
Okay, sure. Yeah, I had this thought the other day because I was thinking about, pediatric transition, and I was like, that actually says a lot about uh, the like judicial capacity of minors. Okay, think about it, because if you're 13 and you can consent to having your genitals rearranged or having your hormones replaced, and that has effects on your libido, it has effects on your entire sexual body. um, what does that say about sexual consent, right? Like like what's a little sex to compared to like surgery to
Mm-hmm.
change the structure of your genitals? Like you can use, you should be able to consent to using your genitals if you can consent to changing them permanently, right? So like I really want to bring up the question of like, because I hear you speaking with women and saying like, rehearsing like, how can you deal with a person who is believing in this stuff? Like, how can you bring up points? And that's probably one of the first points I'd bring up is, if you're against pedophilia, but you're okay with transition, why are you drawing that line when transitioning is actually a lot more extreme than sex, right? And I think it's a pretty simple like way to really just point out the flaw, and if a person says, it's medically backed, it's scientifically backed, well, for one thing, that's not true. And second of all, uh, don't act like the scientific and medical establishment hasn't been actually actively perpetrating some of the worst crimes against people in general and women forever. Like the history of obstetrics, like they might not be on the same page with you on that, but if you mention stuff like the Tuskegee experiment, stuff like that, you can't come at me and say that something is medically justified, then that makes it justified. It's not
Right.
not one to one.
Right.
So
And
yeah,
the process of, like just the amount of touch
right,
on unconscious bodies. And if we're talking about children, oh my God, even worse,
right,
the amount of like medical rape that occurs in the
yeah,
process of castrating and then refashioning the leftover skin into some other fake something, like
right, right.
it's
And
beyond,
even
yeah,
even outside of that context, like doctors are in a position of authority over kids, and they molest children like just for their own pleasure. Like this
yeah,
happens, you
yeah,
know and also like, you know it's like the difference between a 17-year-old and 364 days, and the difference between an 18-year-old, it's really not that drastic. It's really not. And when I was an 18-year-old girl, 18-year-old woman, I mean, when I was that young, I mean, even 19, I'm still 19, like I do not have the capacity to judge the rest of my life like right now. And this is what kids are doing. And just because you're legally 18, it's okay. It's you got to think more about it, because you ask anybody over 30, are you doing exactly what you thought you'd be doing at 18? No, you're not the same person. Even like you're not even the
no,
same. So, and that isn't to say like transitioning would be a good option for somebody who's over 25 or over a certain arbitrary age, because we have to you have to come at the problem. First of all, you have to recognize that it's a problem, that dissociation from your body is a problem. And then you have to come at it from, well, your body's not going anywhere. And if you mess with it, it's not going to work out well for you. Like if you fight your body, you are going to be the one who loses. Your body, when that fails, it's going to be you who loses if you even win. You know what I mean? Like if you win, you will still lose. So, I mean, scientifically, it's known that the physical structure of the brain changes, right? And it's been proven in spiritual traditions like Buddhism and so on that extremely drastic levels of mental transformation happen. Okay, so if anything, the only ethical thing you can suggest is changing the mind, healing the mind. That's the only ethical thing you can suggest at any point. Okay, so you gotta really like let people know that, because like that's what I received negative flack for from my friend, was not being a trans ally afterwards. And it's like, it's fundamentally not the solution. Like I can't say that it works for some people. Like some people do live like that, and I'm glad that they're alive, but it can't be the narrative that we're pushing at all. Like it really, it's just, you know what I mean? It's just not.
Absolutely. Yeah,
Yeah,
like the narrative that it works for some people and it didn't work for you, it doesn't
right,
mean you should like discredit it. And because it works for some people, it's like
right,
based on what do we and how do we even measure what works for someone? Because
right.
they say that they're happy. Well, based on how long? Under
Yeah.
what circumstance compared to being suicidal?
Yeah. Or even, that's the thing, is because the narrative of suicide will influence you to be suicidal. I saw an experiment that they did where essentially they primed these people, they had them in a waiting room, they had people come out from the fake experiment, and the people were talking about how painful it was. Then they went in, they told them to expect pain, and the treatment that they gave them produced was a light. It was just a light, and they all experienced pain from this light. And that's how powerful narrative is. And that's what happened to me, because I was not dysphoric as a child at any point. But after I started identifying, I became dysphoric,
Mm,
because that was the narrative that I was putting on myself, right? So the narrative is really important. And saying that it works for some people, in my opinion, makes it way too individual, because it's we are collective animals. It's the same thing like saying like I'm not a woman because of, like, I'm non-binary because of X. That's hyper individualizing the struggle of being a woman and having the burdens of being a woman, and putting it on you and saying that it's a matter of identity and not like a physical class that you're in, right? So saying it works for some people and some not, that's like leaving the one person to figure it out, when like we need to take like a communal approach and really think that, like, other people's experience actually have some bearing on what you're going to experience. Because if I got sick from it, that's it's not like random. We share a female biology. If you took testosterone, it's a chance you'd get sick, so yeah, yeah, that's what I have to say on that, for sure.
wow.
Yeah.
Wow. I completely agree. Yeah, it's very the trans stuff is completely like individualistic and
Right.
totally fails to see, well, A, to recognize women as a sex class, and B, to yeah, like think and talk about the ways that we've internalized the patriarchy, misogyny, whatever you want to call it, beauty, sexist beauty standards.
Mhm. Yeah.
And I'm curious. So what has, I mean, this is all really fresh. Like I'm like in awe of your like the amount that you've been able to process in such a short amount of time, and like just yeah, you're incredibly insightful. Um and I really enjoyed this conversation, and I'm curious, what has been the biggest part of your healing process, and how do
Mm,
you see kind of that continuation?
right. Yeah. I mean, I don't know. Like, the thing that caused me to fully reconcile with being a woman was like threatening to have my body taken away from me, like being sick. It just makes it like you can't avoid your body anymore, when you're sick and you're just not able to do what you need to do. Like, that just turned me around and made me realize how trivial it was, you know, uh, and how not worth it was to, you know, reject my body. So that was what turned it around for me. Uh, as far as like healing, I mean, honestly, reconnecting with my female relatives and friends, because it turns out I have a lot. Like my mom actually had a home birth. She had a midwife, and we're still friends with her. So, and she has 10 kids, and a lot of them are women. So I've just been, hanging out with them, and sharing my story with people in general, and specifically women too, because was with my mom's midwife, and she has a book club, and it's mostly women, and I shared it with them, and they told me how they felt inspired by my story of how, like, the mental connection of like wanting to have my cycle back, wanting my health back, and then immediately getting it, like that struck a chord for them too. So yeah, just having the what was really missing in the first place, honestly, was the female, recentering women in my life, really. Because while I was identifying as trans, like, I hated women. I just hated. I mean, because I was blocking myself out, I was blocking women out as well. And like, I would even like avoid listening to songs that had female vocalists a lot. Like, I found their voices to be annoying, because I hated my own voice, right? Um, and so yeah, just like, yeah, just recentering women, and like realizing that men are not all that. Like, I do not have to imitate that anymore. Like, that was the mode that I functioned in, that I was comfortable with, that I allowed myself. Uh, but it's not necessary. Women are totally dope as hell, and like, it's cool to be one. Like, not even cool, it's like fulfilling. It's like, there, you mean there's a whole, like, half of the world like shares that with me? It's dope. It's really great. And yeah, so I would say that, yeah, that's been my biggest thing. And it, stretches out into the future, because I'll have these, I'll have my mom, her aunt, everything. I'll have them for as long as I get to have them. So, and, irreplaceable people. So, yeah, other people have really helped me out just by like being around and just listening. And people like you too, because, like, there's not a lot of other perspectives where women are prioritized in this way. Because if you're prioritized as a woman in this culture, it's because you're wearing makeup or something like that, right? Or because you're actually a man, like Woman of the Year, Caitlyn Jenner, like, so your perspective on womanhood, stuff like that, is also helpful too. Just to watch like other women articulating things like this. Yeah. So women. That's my answer.
Wow. Oh
Yeah.
my gosh. That's so beautiful. I
Yeah.
just feel really overwhelmed with like emotion and gratitude and just just such a beautiful that like you were born at home and reconnected with your mother's midwife and you
Yeah,
go to
because
her book club. I mean,
yeah,
like,
this is
oh
the
my
thing.
gosh.
It's because I hadn't even seen her since before I started testosterone. So that was over a year, right? So I just came back in with like a completely different voice. Like, that was a little awkward, but I mean, everybody there loved me. So, it was no big deal. And, she's a midwife. She knows what women are. So she was like, yeah, that, I'm for you. Like, I get it. She was like, she literally told me, she was like, it's like you're alive again. Because when I was identifying, I was just so depressed, and like I was shutting everybody out because they had a perspective on me that I didn't want to see. So yeah, that's my redemption story. Yeah.
Wow. Wow. Your story, yeah, I'm really overwhelmed with emotion and just again gratitude for you and your bravery and wow.
Well,
I mean,
look, this is the thing. I don't feel very brave for sharing this, really, because like people wonder like what's up with you. Your voice, you have a man voice, but like you're not. So I really am not. I'm not afraid or ashamed of sharing it, because it feels like it feels like it's not an open wound anymore. Like, I want people to know what happened to me, because it does have implications for not just women but men too, because like I said, disembodiment is a big problem in our culture. So like, yeah, I mean, I'm totally, I personally, I don't feel like I don't feel like it's taken a lot of courage for me to tell it at all. I enjoy letting people know because it's like a hopeful story. Like I feel that's the thing. I feel great. Like compared to being trans, like that life, I feel really great, you know, notwithstanding the negative things that have happened to me, but like you can either be happy about it or not, so I'll be happy about where I'm at. So yeah, no, I feel like no big deal. Like don't even tell me I'm brave. I'm not brave.
If women want to follow you and support you, like how do you, it can is that possible? Do you
Yeah, I
prefer
mean,
to remain without?
no, I mean, I have a Twitter. I'm not super active on there, but it's at free_Martin with Martin, like the name, with the one. There's a one instead of the I. You'll be able to see a picture of me on there. It has my name. So yeah, I mean, go ahead. I mean, I honestly post more about astrology than I do about trans stuff, but like it's a good mix of both. So if you're, really impacted by what I had to say, give me a DM. See, we can talk maybe.
Awesome. I'll be sure to link your Twitter handle in the show notes.
Okay, for sure.
Awesome.